שדיבר על מערכת היחסים, זה יותר מעניין, על ככלי למחשבה, אוקיי?
כן.
Language is an instrument of thought. We can change the discussion to English if it's more comfortable for you.
Oh yeah, we can do that, yeah.
Because המאמר הוא באנגלית, ואני חייב להגיד, לא באנגלית פשוטה, אז אנחנו נעבור לאנגלית בשביל לסקר אותו גם לדוברי האנגלית שלמעט הדוברי האנגלית, שלמעט, יש לנו מעט מאזינים, ולמעט דוברי האנגלית עוד יותר.
אוקיי.
אז נראה איך זה עובד. כן. אז בואו נתחיל כמובן בהתחלה. אתה רוצה להציג את זה קודם כל? מה בדיוק המחקר? למה עשית אותו?
Okay.
What's the research? What did you present? What did you do?
Yeah, I'll do it in English, I guess, and
Go ahead, yes.
you can translate it if you want.
That's all right. I hope that our listeners could listen to it in English.
Okay.
If they don't, well, we have plenty of time that they can listen in Hebrew.
We can add subtitles. Yeah.
Auto-generated. We have auto-generated subtitles, so
okay.
it'll be fine.
Yeah, so the first thing to notice, I think, is what is meant by language. So there's two understandings of language. One is language is a natural language. So, English, Italian, Hebrew. So that's what's called a natural language. But in this sense, in my article and in my work, language refers to like the mechanisms in the mind that make language possible. So there's a distinction that's often referred to as competence and performance. So the competence is like your computational mechanism in the mind that allows you to produce sentences and understand sentences. But that's separate to our mind or people using that mechanism to communicate. So when you use that mechanism to communicate in a particular language, and that's a particular natural language. But what my type of linguistics studies is the mechanism itself, not the way it's used in communication. So an analogy might be like, you can study how, the structure of the lungs, for example, as a biologist, but you won't study how the lungs are used in the context of the whole body, like when someone walks or when someone is smoking or whatever. So it's like they're connected and they help each other, but they're two separate ways of studying that same mechanism. And it's quite new in terms of studying language, because we don't know much about how any kind of higher cognition works in the brain. So we're trying to unearth the way in which our mind computes any kind of thing, in vision, in cognition in general, in language. So when it says language is an instrument of thought, it means
it doesn't. Let me understand. It means not like the language that you speak, that you learn, that you speak. It's more of the way that you use it in order to display what is your thinking process, or to express it to other people in a more profound way.
Kind of. So what it means is, if you imagine, so our mind has a mechanism, or like a machine that generates sentences, so it puts words together in a certain way, and those words express a particular thought, but that's not language yet. It's just different concepts in our mind which we put together, like cat and mat, we put together and we have a thought. The cat is on the mat, but that's not a language yet. That's just in our mind, and we just think about it. And it could be visual, it could be in any modality. So it only becomes language when that thought moves from like what's called the language faculty, which is just like the computer in the mind that generates that sentence. Yeah, it becomes language when it moves from there to the system in our brain which can externalize that thought. And different languages externalize it in different ways. But the way in which that thought is generated is the same for all humans. We just express it in a different way.
So the process of generating a language starts with a thought, but the language is just a way to express the thought, but the thought is still the same.
It's separate.
If two people think the cat is on the mat in two different languages, the cat is on the mat, they still have the same thought process, but when they express it, the linguistic is separated. Their natural language makes them say something different, but they think the same.
Yeah, and the structure of that thought, the computational mechanism that generates that thought is the same in all humans. So that's what it means by saying language is instant of thought. It's not saying English or Italian or Hebrew is an instant of thought. So that's the first thing to make clear.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And as we go, I'm just going to go through my markers. You said, the underlying mechanism of language comprising of expression structure, like I'm just looking for structure, hierarchy, and recursively, provide perspective in the form of concept structure of the world. For it is only via language that certain perspectives are available to us in our thought process.
So one of the main things that, like the language faculty that I was talking about, so the computer in our mind that puts thoughts together, like one of the main things that it does is allow us to have thoughts which are different to animals. So we know via evolution that we share a lot of thought with animals, like with chimps and monkeys or dogs even or whatever. But what's unique to humans is that we have this mechanism that can put all those concepts together into like a sentence-like thought. So there's been lots of studies with higher primates and birds and they've tried to figure out if animals can think thoughts which can be expressed in a sentence, so as opposed to like cat. If you imagine like a cat and he goes to like he sees a hole and there's a mouse there, like the cat can work out, like there's a mouse there and he goes on the lunge towards it. But there've been studies to see whether that cat can think a thought that can be expressed only in a human language sentence. Mm-hmm. So for example, and can the cat think, yesterday that mouse was there, so today it must be there as well. And then act on that thought.
Definitely yes, I would say. Definitely, I think, like as you said, the animals think in a sentence structure. They don't express the sentence, but they do think in a sentence structure.
Yeah, but it turns out that there's a certain subset of thoughts which only humans can generate. So the classic example is like these kinds of thoughts which only humans can understand. Like some of them aren't even complex. So the most famous example is symmetry. So many animals can't see a certain type of symmetry. So they do studies with birds and monkeys even, like where they give them a maze and like it's symmetrical, so like one side is the same as the other side, and so the things which are not symmetrical is the way they get through the maze. But if it's symmetrical, that you can't get through. So if one is like yellow and one is blue, like that's not symmetrical, but if it's blue and the same, then you know it's the way to go forward. Yeah, and it turns out like no animals can solve like a simple symmetrical maze like that, because that depends on what I talk about, like a certain kind of hierarchy or structure that only humans can generate. Yeah, so there's a kind of
it sounds like more of an aspect of problem solving.
Well, it's not only problem solving, like, because they do similar things with like, you know, faces, for example. Like there's a certain type of, visual seeing that only humans can see. So, in the literal sense, the animal can't see what we see in the world. Yeah,
some animals see black and white, and we see colors all around too.
Yeah, but it's more than that. Like what the animals don't see is a structure or like a way of looking at the world. You know, it's like, yes, we can conceive of the world in terms of tense, for example. You know, so like, we can tell a story in our mind that has like a plot from like the past to the present to the future, and we can act on those understandings. But it turns out that animals can't do that in the same way. Like they can plan ahead in specific context, but if you change that context, you know, it's like I'm certain kinds of birds, for example, know how to, like, they'll remember, say, like, you know, like 50 places where they put food, and they can plan ahead, and they know which, you know, like type of food is going to go off first, and they'll go and eat that food first. But then if you put them somewhere else, like, you know, instead of it being in their own habitat, you put them somewhere else, then they can't do anything. Whereas like with humans, it's not like that. Like, because all of our thought is internal, and it's not bound by the environment. You know, it's like we can do it, you know, with like blocks, or we can do it on paper, or we can do it. So it's kind of like, so our thought is generated like from the inside, and we use it to act on the world. Whereas in the animals, it's reversed. It's like
so we're able to reference, I would say. So if we can solve a problem in one place, we can solve it in another. It's not the same problem, even a problem that is a little bit similar or symmetrical, we can solve it. With animals, it's not always the case. Or it's usually not the case. That's what you're saying, right? You get it right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to just summarize what you're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the main point is not only that, it's just, like, there's just, like, certain ways of looking at the world visually, which, if you don't have, like,
it comes from that, too. Like, it comes from different kind of, let's say, different kind of, maybe, I don't know. I'm shooting at the dark here.
Okay.
So maybe it comes from several aspects of psychoanalysis. One of them is the way they view the world. Okay. Could be, like, that's definitely one. The way they view the world, like, that's what you're saying. The way they view the world influences their problem solving or their thought process, which makes them express things, express a limit kind of things, but humans can express a lot more.
Yeah, and the difference is not, like, it's not a difference in degree, you know, so it's not as if human thought is just more complicated than, you know, like animal thought, or like, it's not more complicated than chimps, like, it's a different in kind. So there's like a specific kind of way of looking at the world, which, is only allowed if you have this, you know, like, type of computation in your mind. And, you know, only in the last 10, 20 years have we kind of, worked out that it's the same mechanism that's responsible for language as well.
Which I think it brings me to another question here. Like, the thought process, the thought is the same, but is being expressed in a different way.
Yeah.
But which brings it to a more basic perspective. What happens when the thought is not always the same? Because when you come from a cultural background, from a different cultural background, it would cause you to, it would inevitably make you think in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay, and that would influence on the type of language you use.
It
So
will,
it's
but
more broad, what I'm saying.
yeah, but that doesn't mean that if that same person goes and lives in a different culture, that they can't understand that other culture.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that your society and the culture influences the way that you speak or the structure of your language. But the question is, what comes first? Like, if you didn't have that culture, will your language, will your thoughts be as complicated and complex in the same way?
And it is.
Yeah.
Because if you have this, so what I think is, if you have what you're saying, if you had the same culture, the same thought, expressed in a different language, it would still be the same.
The same thought, yeah.
Same thought. Like, it would still be the same thought, just expressed in a different language.
Yeah, because this is coming from, like, there's a big debate in linguistics and sociology and anthropology about whether languages influence thought in particular ways. And it's still quite a popular view that your language will influence you to such an extent that if your language is so different than, say, English, you can't, and you move to an English country, you can't understand those concepts. And like, there's a famous case of the piraha in the Amazon, and like this was like in the last 5 or 10 years, like, and there was an infamous linguist who went there and studied like their language and claimed that the language is missing a lot of the crucial aspects that is claimed all languages and all humans have, like the recursion and certain amount of like of tense, it's like talking about the past and future, whatever. And he claimed that like these are like more like primitive types of language, and we can learn from them because it's how language evolved or whatever. Yeah, but like, it turns out that if you take a child from that culture and bring them up in like Sao Paulo, like they can learn.
Just teach them another language, to be honest, they would be able to use tense.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's not what he claims. So like.
So that claim is refuted.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, like it's easy to kind of.
It's
like talk about it and say it's refuted, but he has a lot of evidence, and there was a long debate about whether he's right or not, and so it's a big debate because like I said, a lot of like studies in sociology and anthropology claim this like direct link between your culture and your language and the way that you think, and they claim that it's causal. So if your language has this, so like gendered language, for example, the claim is that people whose language forces them to choose a gender are less or more sexist, like the studies either way.
Our native language.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so...
Yeah, but if you take the view that the way in which you express your thoughts is separate to the way in which you generate your thoughts, then like all those arguments are just kind of fall by the wayside because,
So what you're saying, so let me get this. Okay, so what you're saying, for example, there's a politician in Israel that she uses different kind of genders. It says she uses for words that are usually male, predominantly male gendered language, she uses them as female.
Yeah, or they use they, like in English,
Yeah, so it doesn't even matter. According to that approach, it doesn't even matter because language doesn't constitute thought. And if I'm saying, okay, this is how do you call it? In Hebrew, for example, the way you say male is also the way you say for, most things are male in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Most things are male.
And grammatically male, yeah.
Grammatically male, but they're not physically male. We understand they're not physically male. They're just things. Okay. So the thought process that brings us to use the language is just separable. Most people, that approach says, okay, this is how I express this. it doesn't influence what I actually think.
Yeah.
Okay, which it kind of refutes a lot of claims that says that okay, everybody uses, because we use mostly male, predominantly thing, then our society is macho and
Yeah.
and so maybe their society is macho and sexist and stuff like that, but language, it's not because of the language.
Yeah, and quite often it's put in the cart before the horse, so to speak. So like the reason why people act in a sexist way is not because of the language. Like they act in a sexist way because of the general social context of a sexist society, or laws in the country or whatever. Like there's so many other reasons why. And grammatical gender has nothing to do with it. And in fact, like many languages have more than two genders, so like it makes that argument, kind of nonsense anyway. Like some languages, I think like Icelandic has like 5 maybe, or Turkish or something. So grammatical gender has nothing to do with male or female anyway. And German has 3, has like neuter, male and female. Those kinds of arguments. So that's like one example of how people think that the structure of language influences our thoughts, but when you actually look into it, it turns out it's not the case at all.
So even if we learn, actually the way we teach language is in an external way, we can't teach an internal way. We can't teach language in an internal way.
Well, depends what age you are, though. Like that's the other thing